Okay, hello everyone. This is Scaling AI. This is a talk about getting your AI into production and why you need observability across models, data, pipelines, and infrastructure. So with that, let's get started. All right, AI apps are everywhere, and some are definitely better than others. So consider McDonald's. They put an AI order taker in their drive-thru experience. Did anybody ever come across one of these? If you haven't, look it up on TikTok because there are a ton of videos. I'm going to spoil it for you. The rollout failed. But why? How did they prepare to get this rollout going? Their approach was solid. McDonald's had a partnership with IBM, huge investment of capital, resources, spent millions. They had tons of training data, adaptive learning, NLP to decipher human voices, tokenization, parsing, semantic analysis, highly developed models. And they had scalable performance backed by IBM Cloud, state-of-the-art cloud monitoring too. And what were the results? Have you seen the videos? It's things like orders with $250 plus of chicken McNuggets, right? You want a water and an ice cream? How about some butter and ketchup to go with that? Oh, you didn't mean to order Diet Coke? Here's 9 sweet teas instead. It went hilariously poorly. So poorly that it became a viral sensation. So what happened? How did they end up there? And in short, it's the real world, right? When they rolled out, there was background noise. There were various hard to understand accents from customers. There were very complex orders. Customers were using slang. The short of it is, customers are going to use your AI applications in ways that you can never fully predict in a lab. And McDonald's simply wasn't ready for that, right? They rolled out their AI app to customers believing that they had prepared for everything. But in production, you never know how users are going to behave and what they're going to ask their applications to do. So McDonald's pulled the plug. You're not going to find AI in any of their drive-thrus anywhere anymore. Why? Because once you roll out to production, you need incredibly tight feedback loops to proactively catch and prevent issues while also using that to continuously iterate on your model's performance. And if you don't have a good way to catch production issues and fix them before they impact users, your AI initiatives are likely to follow a similar path. You need to be ready for production because it's an entirely different world out there, which means integrating observability and governance tools into your workflows now before you roll out into production. That's the difference between rolling out your AI successfully or rolling it back. So, hi, I'm George. I'm co-author of the O'Reilly book, Observability Engineering. So I am relatively new to the AI space, but I made a career as an engineer working on large-scale distributed systems in the video game and finance industries. And during the shift to quote-unquote DevOps, I became a consultant. And in the second half of my career, I've gotten to work with some of the world's largest infrastructures. And this book was primarily written for software engineers who nowadays are closer than ever to the customer experience, right? Customers so deeply rely on these applications that now, for the first time in their careers, most developers were on call and they were responsible for production systems. And that meant, right, not only were they on call, they had unpredictable issues. And as their systems became microservices and large, distributed, complex, that meant that old troubleshooting methods and debugging tools no longer worked. And so what they discovered was they needed very tight feedback loops to find and fix elusive issues that were only happening in production. That's how I found Honeycomb. That's the company that coined the term quote unquote observability for software systems. And it was there that my co-authors and I wrote this book. And it's also there where I witnessed this phenomenon firsthand, because at Honeycomb, we rolled out an AI application that we debuted about 3 months after ChatGPT was first a thing. And we were not ready because users asked our app to do all sorts of things that we never anticipated, things that we had no way of predicting. And we needed ways to observe what was happening in production and find issues that our normal tooling just couldn't show. And then we needed to take that data about what was happening and use it to improve the performance of our AI system. And we learned a lot of these lessons the hard way. So I'm no longer at Honeycomb. I'm actually now at a company called InsightFinder. And I was drawn to InsightFinder and the AI space because I believe this is the new frontier, right? The same shifts that we saw happening in DevOps, those are coming for AI and ML teams, which means if you're an AI or ML engineer, you're going to be on call if you're not already. And you're going to be responsible for finding very elusive issues in production. I mean, just look at what was happening at McDonald's, right? So now is the time to prepare and get ahead of those issues that are coming for us. So today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the common pitfalls for what trips up people when they roll out AI in production and give you concrete ways to assess if your stack is production ready. So 4 main reasons that AI apps get rolled back, and they almost always fail for reasons in one of these categories. So number 1, data quality. This is the foundation that crumbles. So when data quality deteriorates, right, you've got drift, corruption, staleness, AI systems very quickly become unreliable actors. 2, unreliable outputs, right? Your AI becomes a liability. And so LLM hallucinations make all the headlines, right? They make for funny videos, but bias, toxicity, off-brand responses, security gaps, those can all be equally devastating. 3, data security and governance, right? And so this is the trust breach related. So malicious prompt injection can manipulate models. Data leakage can expose sensitive information, right? Basically, in this situation, you unwittingly left yourself exposed and open. And then number 4, lack of visibility and explainability. So this is the black box problem, right? A lack of transparency becomes a nightmare in high stakes customer interactions. And the higher the stakes, the more acutely you're going to feel this particular bit of pain. So that's it. Like, it is almost always one of these, right? These are the reasons AI gets rolled back. And I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking about that McDonald's example, and you're like, well, wasn't it bad inputs and accents and slang and complexity? And yes, absolutely, you are correct. That was the source. But how did customers see it, right? How did executives see it? Like, it's not the inputs that are a problem. It's the outputs that they got that were causing all of those videos to go viral, right? These are the smoking gun, right? On the screen, these are the incontrovertible and incriminating bits of evidence, right? Obviously, a lot of other factors go into this, like, why was the gun there? Why did he even get fired in the first place? But this, the stuff on the screen, this is what your customers and your execs at your company will point to as the reasons that AI needs to get rolled back. So we're going to talk about how we mitigate each one of these and prevent them from happening. All right, so number 1, data quality, right? This is why you need observability in your data and your pipelines. So standard observability solutions don't work for AI and ML models. So model drift isn't a bug that you can patch or a server that you can restart, right? Traditional monitoring assumes deterministic systems, right? A 500 error always means that something is broken, right? A slow page that rendered slow enough over a large enough percentage of traffic always requires immediate attention, right? And so on. So with AI and ML systems, though, predictable binary behavior is instead replaced by nuanced operations and non-deterministic systems. Right? The same inputs don't always equal the same outputs, which means that a model can appear functional, right, within the expected output ranges, but at the same time be making systematically biased decisions that aren't reflected in standard performance metrics. Right? So, like, for example, let's say you run a fraud detection system and the model is passing all of your health checks, right? Latency, throughput, error rates, no issues. Yet somehow, right, you could also be shipping fraudulent transactions through the system at twice the normal rate. Why? The model drifted. And model drift can slowly erode prediction accuracy for weeks and at the same time be completely invisible to standard monitoring tools. Right? You need to be able to detect drift in real time in order to get ahead of unexpected changes that can have devastating business consequences. At InsightFinder, for a concrete example, we do this with proprietary unsupervised behavior learning algorithms, and we deploy these alongside your models, right? We can spot small deltas in behavior and alert you to anomalies. And further, we can show you why those anomalies happen, right? So we automatically compare those against your baseline and show you the causes behind the change. But importantly, that's done within seconds and minutes, not hours, not days. And so when thinking about production readiness, what you need to be asking yourself is if your tool chain can detect model drift. And many of them can. But if so, how fast, right? Is that fast enough? Who's getting alerted? And how are they responding when something is detected, right? The net of it is, right, can you catch these issues before they steamroll customer experience? So you need real-time observability in your data and your pipelines. And that's how you solve the first problem, right? Data quality and the crumbling foundation. 2, unreliable outputs, right? So here I'm going to pick on LLMs because we were just talking about ML models, right? But this is the McDonald's story, right? Works fine in development, but it's a disaster in production. Why was it a disaster though, right? And where did the failures occur? You have to know where if you're going to explain the why. And so first of all, right, can you even detect that there's an issue? And can you detect that in real time, right? We've covered that. But more often than not, right, how are we capturing these things? Like, are you just aggregating a thumbs up or a thumbs down response when an answer comes back, right? What do? You collect those and then analyze them once it's print so that it informs your RAG patterns? I mean, that's an approach, but is that fast enough, right? Are you going to be able to catch issues in that workflow before your company ends up on TikTok? It's also not enough to just detect that there's an error, right? So let's say that metrics show you that your error rates went up. All right, cool. You know that there's a problem, but why did the error occur, right? Did the LLM fail? I mean, what could have possibly failed, right? Was it inputs from the user? You know, was it their accent? Was there noise in the microphone or a bad microphone in the drive-thru? Let's say it wasn't the inputs, right? Is it in how your app received those inputs and then maybe processed them before handing them to the LLM? Right? Was the LLM itself the source of error? And if it was the LLM, I mean, was it an availability issue? Right? Did you run out of tokens? Could you not authenticate? Was it an API error? Right? And if it wasn't any of those, well, maybe it was the LLM output, right? Was it a hallucination? I don't know. Maybe, right? If it wasn't that, well, then maybe it's how you took that LLM response, right? And took the raw response and parsed it before giving it back to the user. How did you process the output, right? And if the output itself was valid, did the user just not like it, right? It was correct, but the user just didn't like it for whatever reason, right? There are so many places in the dependency chain where an error could possibly have been introduced. How do you know where or even why that happened? And so at InsightFinder, the way that we try to tackle this issue is with TraceView and real-time analytics of LLM performance, right? And so basically, that is a way to give you the instrumentation that you need to trace LLM calls automatically and have rich context around every part of what's happening in that dependency chain, so you can see the various steps involved in returning any particular user result, right? And then we can analyze all of those dependencies in real time to detect performance drifts or things that aren't quite up to the spec that you're expecting. But again, right, multiple ways of doing that. And so questions that you need to be asking when you're thinking about production readiness for your stack is, 1, how do you detect LLM issues? 2, are you detecting them fast enough to respond before customer damage occurs? 3, right, can you see the inputs, like the processing steps, the outputs, all of those intermediary steps that are required to get to an answer? And then how well can you quickly determine why an LLM response was bad in the first place, right? These are kind of the checklists that you need to go through in order to get there. So observability provides a deep context in your LLM transaction dependency chain to show you what's happening so that you can stop your AI from becoming a liability, right? Trace back, find the source of issue, and get ahead of it. 3, data security and governance. Now, this is a big topic, and I don't have that much time in this presentation. There are entire classes of tools, in fact, multiple classes of tools built to solve this large and complex problem. But I'll say this, as AI and ML developers, there are some basic frontline defenses that you can have. And so building on the earlier example of using LLMs, right? A lot of mistrust happens around data leakage and exposure, right? And so data security is a massive topic, but I want to focus on the governance part of that, right? Governance is all about having tight feedback loops, seeing what's happening and having the ability to respond. So you need to know what your users are experiencing, right? You need to put guardrails in and control what they possibly can experience. And then when something occurs outside of those bounds, you need to be able to see that and then incorporate those learnings into your development cycle so that you can mitigate and prevent quickly. So, right, going back to an earlier point, hallucinations make all the funny headlines, right, in the viral videos, but bias is a real threat, right? Toxicity in responses can destroy your company's reputation or your company's revenue or both, right? Bias in the financial and medical industries can have both financial and life-altering consequences. But if you can't get ahead of these types of responses, right, if you can't fix them before they are widespread, that's how you end up in a place where you start rolling back your AI initiatives. Right? We've already talked about detecting drift and bad outputs, but what about controlling inputs, right? Do your tools give you the ability to proactively predict what users are going to be able to ask and what they're going to get as a response from the products that you are building? Probably. Like, how good do you feel about that, right? Remember how McDonald's felt before they went out into production. So look, you cannot possibly predict everything that users are going to ask their applications to do. And yes, you absolutely should prepare for that thoroughly while in development. But no, you cannot possibly make a perfect comprehensive model that's built to handle every possible circumstance and permutation. However, what you can do is shorten the time between you realize that something strange and unexpected happened and how you deploy a fix for it. Right? And so at InsightFinder, we do this with a product we call LLM Labs. Right? And so LLM Labs essentially allows you to create prompt packs and run them against different models. And so you can compare the outputs that you will get from different models side by side to see which of those come back with results that show things like bias or toxicity or inappropriate tone, right? You can see which models are more prone to things like prompt injection attacks and key discovery areas. And more importantly, you can connect that workflow to what you're seeing real time in those traces, right? Which means when you get something unexpected, where you can see, you know, those questions you didn't anticipate, those use cases you were never aware of, you can take that user data that's happening in production and use it to quickly iterate against your prompts, see what responses those are going to be, and choose the right models to answer or create answers for users in that scenario. So you can't predict everything that real users are going to do with your application, but you can certainly learn quickly when it's happening in production, when those unpredictable situations do happen, right? And so when it comes to production readiness, this is essentially what you are trying to gauge in your tool stack, right? One, can you clearly see and understand what's happening in production? Two, if you can, how do you feed that data back into your models in your prompts so that you can refine them quickly? Because user behavior in production, that is the richest source of all of those unexpected things you could not anticipate. And then, right, having done that, can you route LLM requests to different models based on vectors like performance, cost, availability, right? And fine tune the performance based on all the resources that you have to work with, right? In other words, this is another way of saying how tight is the feedback loop that you have between development and production, right? In other words, how quickly can you move? So you need observability in your prompts and responses to ensure proper governance. That's not how you solve the entire data and security governance problem entirely, but it does go a long way. And then lastly, lack of visibility and explainability, right? So this is the black box problem. And this is a huge concern in AI applications. And I'm not just counting how big of a problem this is, But I will say that in practice, sometimes we see the black box problem manifest in ways that aren't really a black box. Often it's the first part of that statement, right? It's lack of visibility. And so this is one that I see a lot of products today miss entirely. Or it's also like the one that I see a lot of products only focus on, which in some ways is worse. Because essentially what's missing here is a link between your AI world and your tools and the rest of your stack, right? So here's what I mean. There are two vectors to this problem, right? And the first one we touched on earlier, right? So like you're using a commercial LLM and there are a bunch of steps to delivering outputs, right? With an API error, authentication, LLM error, right? But it could also be additional things in that chain that went wrong. It could have been the network failing, right? Too much latency, an application error. Maybe there was an infrastructure problem. There are countless places in the dependency chain where a failure could have happened, not just what's happening in your AI tools, right? That includes your infrastructure. And this is where I see a lot of the standard observability tools jump in, right? Which is, we'll show you everything that's happening on the infrastructure layer, but how connected are they really, right? Let's look at an example. If you decide to self-host a model, right, and there are plenty of reasons to do that, performance, information security, governance, right? But when you do, let's say something goes wrong. If you get model drift, right, is that occurring because data was missing from the pipeline, right? Or did data just get dropped because it landed in corrupt cache? Or is there an underlying hardware failure that might actually explain why you're suddenly seeing a bottleneck, right? So here's the takeaway. In that situation, do you, the AI or ML team, have access to the infrastructure tools that would show you that? And vice versa, right? Does your SRE or platform team have access to the systems and the tools that would show them that model drift is happening? Like, would either of you know to talk to each other? I mean, sure, eventually you would figure that out, but probably after hours of searching. And we have seen this type of segmentation before, right? Development versus operations. And I kind of feel like we're going down the same route when it comes to data scientists, ML teams versus SRE and platform, right? So the net of it is this, right? You need seamless visibility across the entire stack in the same tool chain. And so at InsightFinder, for example, we do this with those same unsupervised behavior learning algorithms and causal interfaces I talked about earlier, but we give you real-time alerts and automated root cause analysis across your stack, right? When we do that by plugging in to the rest of your observability tools and analyzing system telemetry, so that's a value add on top that operates where everybody can see the same things. And there's definitely more than one way to do that. But what I would say is when you're considering tools and the visibility they give you, right, beware of tools that just give you high-level metrics, right, which show you that there's a problem somewhere happening in the system, but not why that's occurring. Beware of tools that focus on infrastructure and DevOps troubleshooting tactics, and they just try to apply that to the AI and ML side of the world because the rules are significantly different. And also beware of AI and ML tools that don't integrate with the rest of your infrastructure tool chain, right? You're trying to avoid that divide. And so when it comes to production readiness, essentially what you're doing is you're asking, how do tools help not just me or the AI and ML team, but how do they help everyone that is responsible for ensuring availability in production, right? Do they help you know where and why an issue is happening is essentially what you're looking for, right? And so those are some of the most important questions that you need to ask as you examine production readiness. And I will say this again, right? You need to be ready for production because it's a whole different world out there, which means integrating good observability and governance tools in your workflows now. And again, there's more than one way to do these things, but you need to do these things, right? And you should be asking your questions. And so that's what we're building at InsightFinder. I think we're very passionate about building AI that's so trustworthy you could comfortably put it in front of your customers. And the way to do that is by integrating the right checks and balances in your workflows now before you get them in production. So with that, that's what I've got. If this resonates with you, there are a couple of QR codes, so you can try the experience for yourself. Also, a QR code where you can read a little bit more about these concerns. Again, I've spent my career both being on the front lines of production and supporting software teams that are moving into the crazy world of production support. And as that happens more in the AI and ML world, that's exactly what we're here to do at InsightFinder. So with that, I'm going to go over to see if there are any questions, if I can remember exactly how to bring up Q&A. There we go. Oh, lots of questions. All right, let's get through some of these. When should teams start thinking about AI observability? Pre-prod or only at scale? I will give you what I think is the correct answer, which is the earlier the better, right? I will say pragmatically, a lot of teams, like we were talking about, don't realize the issues until they roll out. Here's what I would say. It helps so observability, like proper observability, is not just about understanding what's in production, but having that feedback loop into how you iterate your models and how you iterate those guardrails and how you ensure better safety in your AI systems, right? And so there's a little bit of a flow that goes between deployment, watching what's happening in production, and pulling that back in so that you can mitigate and sort of go through the cycle again, right? And you can do that well before you get to production. And the sooner you start practicing that workflow, the sooner you're going to realize what some of the limitations are or how often you need to be observing, and also make sure that the right folks on your team are structured to be looking at the right parts of the process, right? So earlier the better, and there's no reason you can't start early in the development process. Let's see. Are you seeing teams actually close the loop from observability to automated remediation? So in other words, scaling infra, rolling back a model, or restarting a pipeline. Yes. And I will tell you, so I am relatively new at InsightFinder. I've been at InsightFinder for about 6 weeks. And so I've talked to some of our customers, but I will tell you what I see in the wild. The teams that are good at this have cobbled together a number of different tools, right? And so speaking to customers in InsightFinder, I see the workflow with some of our products. I can't say that I'm that close to some of the outcomes and like whether or not they're doing this in production, because I haven't gotten that far. But for example, what I was talking about with trace view, right, and having really rich context around seeing an end-to-end transaction and the inputs, the outputs, right? When you determine that there's an error, if you have that, you can follow those traces. And I've seen teams look for particularly gnarly bugs, right? Or like, the kind of issue that forces somebody to open a support ticket, right? And complain and let you know that unexpected behavior is there, right? Or like a certain bit of outcome that's causing so many of those thumbs down that there's a point of concern. What I have seen is folks get better at that, but I wouldn't say that there's like an automatic closing of it, right? There's still a lot of what I see as manual steps to gather that and put it back in the feedback cycle. And what I'm excited about at InsightFinder, when you look at some of the things that we're building, is that LLM Labs, for example, gives you ways to do that quickly and automatically and pull that in. And I don't have an actual real example of somebody doing that in production, but I think we're closer than we have been. So what I would say is reach out to me, George@insightfinder.com. Talk to me in a couple of months, and I hope to have some juicy stories for you. Let's see. Do you surface alerts differently depending on whether it's a model issue or a data system one, or a data/system one? Let's see. Yes. The screenshot that I was showing, I'm going to try to, can I move my slides back? I'm being challenged here. All right. So the screenshot that I was showing earlier with model drift detection is specific to looking at your models and specific to looking at your pipelines. And the way that InsightFinder does it, we have what we call our IT observability product, and that specifically looks at more infrastructure level concerns. But, right, if that is in place, for example, when you see model drift, I really want to pull back the slide. There we go. Now it's moving. In this slide, you'll see, oh, it's cut off. Maybe can we see it in one of these others? Yeah, like even here in the trace view, right? You can see there's a data quality issue that's detected and also alerting you to infrastructure issues that were found. Granted, they were found by another tool in another part of the stack, but those different systems are talking to each other, right? So to answer your question, they get surfaced in the context of what you're looking for, but the causal attributes are pulled in at the same time, right? If you were just looking at it from the IT observability side, it would look different. So technically, like, it is surfaced differently, but for you, the operator, where you are, actually interacting, it should just be relevant and pull in the right bits of context that you need. And then lastly, what's our question here? Do you flag risky prompts like injection or biased outputs out of the box? I'm glad I went back here because where was this? If you can see this, if you can zoom in on your screen, this is what some of the things that LLM Labs looks for, right? And so it looks, I can't zoom. But you can see over on the left here, here are some of the pre-boxed out of the can things that we look for. And you can also upload your own library of prompts as well, and get these evaluations side by side with some of the other models. So I think that is it for questions. And if I'm not wrong, I'm actually a little bit over time. So thank you, everybody. Again, if you have any questions, I'll be around on the chat. And if you want to reach out personally, George at InsightFinder.com, happy to chat about any of this anytime. Thank you.